Hello, I'm Troy Miller. In this program, we will discuss the new preliminary digital flood insurance rate maps, also known as DFIRM. We'll discuss how these maps were created, why they are different than the previous flood maps, and how they may affect you. New preliminary digital flood insurance rate maps have been released for public comment by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, also known as FEMA. Flood maps are used by FEMA to set flood insurance rates, regulate floodplain development, and inform those who live in the 100-year floodplain of potential hazards. And they require continuous maintenance and revision due to land development and natural changes to the landscape. Collier County is not alone in this endeavor. FEMA's map modernization program of 2003 to 2008 resulted in digital flood maps for 92% of the continental U.S. population, most of whom live in areas that had outdated maps or no maps at all. Beginning in 1998, FEMA proposed to update the flood insurance rate map for Collier County. Concerns were raised by the county and the City of Naples staff that the proposed map was not accurate, that it was based on less than reliable data, and that it placed an undue insurance burden upon the property owners in many locations. At that time, the proposal was to take the area, including Golden Gate Estates, up to Immokalee, out of the previously classified Flood Zone D and replace it with Flood Zone A designation. A Flood Zone D is an area with possible but undetermined flood hazards, whereas a Zone A is deemed to be an area likely to experience flooding. The impact of changing the areas to Zone A would have been the mandatory purchase of flood insurance at a very expensive premium rate, with no defined base flood elevation that could be used to determine if an existing structure was high enough to avoid the flood insurance requirement. By 2004, the county, City of Naples, and FEMA had reached a compromise to leave the areas as Flood Zone D and mutually worked to produce a new map based on more accurate geographic and technical data and analysis. That agreement would benefit county residents a few ways. First, it allowed for more accurate maps through better science.
In the old days, they used the U.S. Geological Survey maps, the USGS maps. No topography was really flown. The rainfall elevation was taken off very limited areas. In other words, they had rain gauges in only certain locations. In the past 6 years, we've done extensive modeling. We've had a LiDAR flown. We have topography that's much more accurate. Even though we're using older information, that information is much more accurate towards the elevations within the county. And we've got historical rainfall events throughout of Collier County in many locations. We've worked with the Water Management District to use current modeling, best practices. So, yeah, the data is much more accurate. Now, you've got up to 12 different basins in Collier County, and they have to be kind of blended together. That's a challenge, but the consultant's done a pretty good job. Remember, there are two consultants, one that works for FEMA, one that works for the county. They've been going back and forth, kind of cross-checking information back and forth. Again, I'll say to the Board of County Commissioners' credit, they've spent over $1 million to do this extensive modeling to make sure we have the best information available.
Since the current flood insurance map remained effective for 6 additional years, thousands of folks were able to save a significant amount of money by not being placed in higher risk flood zones without the best science and research available to accurately define flood zones. In some cases, the few more accurate maps actually resulted in a reduction of flood risk.
To the board's credit, they bought about 6 years. By the time these maps become effective almost in 2011, that gives the homeowners in the estates a 6-year period where they're not, if they are in a flood zone, they wouldn't have to pay for flood insurance. Interestingly enough, a lot of City of Naples and northern Collier County in the urban area has had the BFE, the base flood elevations, reduced. So they've come into the meetings, looked, and said, we're doing much better than we did before. Doesn't apply to everybody, but I'd say there's been a change, especially in the urban area, where at least the BFE has gone down. So they're in a better situation than they were before.
Before we go too much further, let's hear from the Principal Project Manager, Robert Wiley, about what flood insurance is, how it works, and what it covers.
Years ago, when there was some massive flooding out through the central part of the United States, the people suffered tremendous damages. They could not purchase private flood insurance because the insurance industry knew the only people who would ever purchase it were the ones that were going to be flooding. And so therefore they did not make it economically available. So Congress stepped in and created the National Flood Insurance Program. Through a series of amendments to that program, it has evolved into the phase it is now, where it is mandatory that a person has flood insurance on their structure if they have federal monies attached to it, most commonly through a mortgage. But the program is designed to provide an affordable way to protect your house from flooding. Your homeowner's policy, as a general rule, does not cover flooding. It will say right on it, does not cover flooding. So the flood insurance is a separate policy. The rates are established by an act of Congress. You would go to any insurance agent who sells flood insurance, which typically they also sell the homeowners policies. They will quote you a policy price through the federal flood insurance program. It's a separate policy from your homeowner, and every agent should be able to quote you the exact same price. Flood insurance coverage starts with it being a flood as defined by the National Flood Insurance Program. That would not include a pipe bursting in your house and having water, but it's when the ground surface outside your house on at least 2 properties comes up and enters into your house. So you have water from the outside coming in. It is not if you have a major hurricane, it blows a window out and rain comes in, your homeowners covers that. We're talking about the water rising up and entering into your house. That's what the flood insurance program covers. It will cover damage to your house structure. If you have also purchased contents coverage that's available through the flood insurance program, it will cover damage to your contents. Now, being an insurance policy, you do need to understand what is covered, what is not. All insurance policies have those caveats in them so that you're not going to be able to say you cover absolutely everything, but it covers damage to the structure, it covers damage to the major equipment. Things such as carpet would not be, that's considered a wearable item. So, understand that it is insurance coverage, and it will have the fine print. Everyone needs to read it, but all policies will say the same thing. We don't have basements, so that's sort of an issue that doesn't really come into play in Collier County. But as I said, certain pieces of equipment, your air conditioner, your washer, dryer, things that are typically out in the garage area, those also are covered underneath your policy through the flood insurance program.